I told my daughter she was an angel the day I signed those papers. Said it out loud, right there at my own kitchen table, with my hand still warm from the pen. 14 months later, that signature had emptied the only thing standing between my grandson and a county bed in a building with a code on the door, and it had come within about 9 days of getting me declared unfit to stop her. What keeps me up at night isn't the money, friend. It isn't the house. It isn't the lawyers or the courtrooms or the phone calls. It's that I raised her. I taught that girl to ride a bike on Gladstone Street. I sat in a folding chair in the rain for 11 years of her softball games. And while I was up at 2 in the morning changing sheets for a boy who can't tie his own shoes, she was sitting in her car in my driveway doing arithmetic on what I had left. My name is Raymond Keller. Everybody's called me Ray since about 1961. I'm 77 years old, and I spent 38 years as a locksmith in Duluth, Minnesota. Commercial and residential. I put deadbolts on half the houses in Lakeside and rekeyed most of the storefronts on Superior Street at one time or another. That was my trade, and I was good at it. I could stand in front of a door for 10 seconds and tell you exactly how a man would get through it. The hinge, the strike plate, the cheap builder's lock somebody trusted because it came with the house. 38 years of looking at doors and seeing the weakness in them. Nobody rekeys their own front door. I want you to remember that when you get to the part where you're wondering how a man like me could be so blind. I live in a brown shingled house on Gladstone, 4 blocks up from the lake. The kind of street where the snow gets pushed into walls taller than a car by February, and the neighbors still shovel each other out without being asked. My wife Maureen picked that house in 1979. She stood in the front room while the realtor talked, and she wasn't listening to a word of it. She was watching the light come off the water through the side window. And she said, "Ray, we're not going to need another one." She was right about that and about most things. I got used to it around year 6. Maureen died 4 years ago this past March. A stroke in the grocery store, in the cereal aisle, with a list in her hand. There was no long goodbye, and no chance to say anything worth saying, and I have spent 4 years deciding whether that was a mercy or a robbery. Some days I still don't know, but she wasn't the one I was afraid for. 11 years ago, my son Danny and his wife Sarah were driving home from Grand Rapids on Highway 2 in a February whiteout. Danny was 34. He had my hands and his mother's patience, and he was better than me in every way that counted. They didn't make it. My grandson Peter was 9 years old in the back seat, and he did make it, but not all of him did. Traumatic brain injury. He was in a bed at St. Mary's for 6 weeks, and when he came out of it, he came out different. He is 20 years old now. He is the happiest human being I have ever known, and he will need somebody to help him with his medication and his money and his bus schedule every single day for the rest of his life. We call him Petey. He bags groceries 3 mornings a week at the Super One, up on the hill, and he takes it more seriously than I ever took anything. He knows the names of every cashier and every one of their kids. He says good morning to the parking lot. There was a settlement after the crash. It took 2.5 years, and it cost me things I don't talk about. And at the end of it, there was $412,000 in a special needs trust with Peter Keller's name on it. Not $1 of that was mine, friend. I want that understood. That was money paid because my son died in a ditch off Highway 2. That was the price of Danny, converted into a number and put in a bank so that his boy would have a landing pad the day I'm not here anymore. And that day is coming. That's the thing about being 77 with a boy who's going to need a caretaker at 50. I don't get to be afraid of dying in the abstract, the way most men are. I've got a specific fear with a specific shape, and it visits me every night around 3. I go first, and Petey ends up somewhere with a code on the door, and nobody who knows he doesn't like the sound of the microwave. That trust was the answer to that fear. That was the whole reason I could sleep at all. Before I take you any further, do an old man a small favor. Tap subscribe, and hit that like button. Most folks stay to the end of these and never do it. It costs you nothing, and it's the whole reason a channel like this one can keep telling stories like mine. And tell me down in the comments where in the world you're listening from and what time it is where you're sitting. Now stay with me. This is where it turns. 6 weeks after Maureen's funeral, my daughter called me. Dana is my oldest, 49, office manager at a dental practice out on Central Entrance for 19 years, the kind of woman who shows up to a family gathering with a printed schedule. She was always the one who handled things. When Maureen was in the hospital, Dana was the one asking the nurses the right questions while I stood in the hallway holding my hat like a fool. She said, "Dad, I've moved my Tuesdays and Thursdays. I'm going to be there. And I'm not asking you. I'm telling you, because you'll say no. I'm not a man who cries. My father considered tears a structural defect, and he built me accordingly. I stood dry-eyed at my own son's funeral because Petey was holding my hand and somebody in that pew had to be a wall. But I sat down on the bottom step of my own staircase with the phone against my ear, and I could not get a word out for a full minute because all I could think was, Maureen was right about her. She always said Dana had it in her. She used to say it, and I'd nod and think, sure, honey. And there she was, proving it, at the exact moment I couldn't carry another ounce. Now, I need you to hold that phone call in one hand, friend, and hold this in the other, because I didn't learn it for another year and a half. North Shore Companion Care LLC was registered with the state of Minnesota 9 days after Maureen's funeral. 9 days. She filed the paperwork on a Wednesday. She called me 6 weeks later. She had the vehicle built before she ever offered to be my daughter. But I didn't know that. So let me tell you what I saw, because what I saw was good enough to fool a man who could look at a storefront and tell you which window somebody would come through. She was at my house 4 days a week. She rebuilt my medicine cabinet with a label maker. She sat in on Petey's annual service plan meeting at Lake Walk Vocational and asked his job coach Rosalie 2 questions I hadn't thought to ask in 11 years. She drove him to the dentist. She drove him to the barber, who is particular, because Petey is particular. She took him for donuts on Fridays, every Friday, without fail, and he started counting the week by it. Monday was 3 days from donuts. Tuesday was 2. She took the insurance calls. She took the pharmacy runs. She took the whole mountain of paper that my wife used to handle and that had been quietly burying me since the cereal aisle. I thanked God for her, and I'm not much of a church-going man. Here's what I didn't see. She wasn't helping me carry it. She was taking inventory. That January, I went out my own front steps in my slippers to knock the ice off the rail, which was a stupid thing for a 76-year-old man to do, and I went down the whole flight and fractured my wrist and cracked 2 ribs. 5 days in the hospital. Painkillers that made the ceiling breathe. And the entire time I was flat on that bed, the only thought in my head, over and over like a stuck record, was, if that had been my hip, if that had been my head, who has Petey tonight? Dana came to the house the second week I was home. She had a folder with her. She set it on the kitchen table between us the way you'd set down something heavy you'd carried a long way. Dad, I need you to really hear me, and I need you to not get proud on me. She had a way of talking that I've thought about a lot since. Even, unhurried. Every sentence sanded down. She never pushed. She'd say a thing, and then leave a silence and let your own fear finish the argument for her. You went down those steps, and you got lucky, she said. Next time you don't get lucky, and here's what happens next time. There's no second name on that trust. There's no standby guardian on file. Petey goes to county emergency placement inside of 48 hours while a judge sorts it out. He sleeps somewhere he's never been, Dad, with people who don't know him. I want you to understand something. She did not have to convince me of one single thing. She only had to say out loud the exact sentence I had been saying to myself in the dark for 11 years. It was like she'd been sitting under my bed with a notebook. She opened the folder slow, nothing rushed. This makes me co-trustee so I can move money for his care without a 2-week delay. This is a durable power of attorney so I can handle your side of it if you're in a bed again. And this one names me standby guardian so there's never a night where nobody has him. My wrist was in a cast. My ribs hurt when I breathed. I hadn't slept a full night in 4 years, and I had the particular kind of tired that doesn't live in your body. Friend, it lives in your judgment. It gets into the part of a man that's supposed to slow down and read the whole page. I signed. All of it. She had it notarized the next morning at a place on Miller Trunk and mentioned it to me later like she was mentioning the weather. And God help me, I slept 9 hours that night. First time since the funeral. I thought I had finally handed something heavy to somebody strong enough to hold it. What I actually handed her was every key I had. If you've ever signed something you should have read because you were simply too tired to be careful, you already know the sound the floor makes right before it goes. Now run the clock forward 14 months, friend. Pills at 7, the bus at 8:15, Rosalie's calls. 2 ER trips for a seizure disorder Petey developed at 16. 14 months of good mornings and bad mornings, and 1 very bad week where he asked me 9 days in a row when his mom and dad were coming back, which happens sometimes, and there is no way to answer it that doesn't take something out of you. 14 months of being grateful, and then a Sunday in February split my life in half. It was Petey's 20th birthday. Dana hosted at her place out in Hermantown, the split level with the good driveway. There was a sheet cake with a fishing boat on it, because Petey asked for a fishing boat on it. My granddaughter Bree was there, Dana's girl, 24, a nurse over at St. Luke's, the one good thing that came out of that marriage, and I mean that. And Curtis came. Curtis Voss is Dana's ex-husband. They split 6 years ago, and this family took a side, and it wasn't his. I'd heard it all, that he was cold, that he was controlling, that he'd checked out of that marriage years before he left. I never got the specifics because I never asked for them. She was my daughter. That's how it goes. But Curtis has shown up for Petey's birthday every single year since the divorce, uninvited, with a wrapped present, and stood in the entryway for 11 awkward minutes while my family looked at their shoes. Because Petey loves him. Petey doesn't have politics. Petey has people. That day he came in with a tackle box, the good kind, and Petey about knocked him over. And when Curtis shook my hand at the door in that mudroom full of boots, he closed his other hand over mine and I felt him press something into my palm. A folded index card. He held my eyes for about a second and a half. That's all. A man who has been waiting a long time for the right doorway. I went and sat down at the table with a folded card in my fist and my heart going sideways. I waited until Dana was carrying in the plates, and I opened it under the edge of the tablecloth. Don't react. Open Petey's trust account on your phone right now. Then tell them your back has locked up and get to your truck. I'll be 2 cars behind you. See. I hadn't looked at that account in over a year, friend. Dana handled it. That was the arrangement. That was the whole point of the arrangement. It took me 3 tries to get the password right. $8,940. There had been $412,000. I sat there and I read that number, maybe 6 times. Across the table, Petey was telling Bree, very seriously, that the man in the fishing boat on the cake was him. The furnace kicked on. The whole house smelled like a pot roast. Somebody laughed in the kitchen. I put my hand on the small of my back and I said, "Ah, hell, that's my back. It's gone out on me. I'm sorry, kiddo. Grandpa's got to go lie down flat." Dana came out onto the front step with a Tupperware of cake for me. She stood in the porch light with her arms crossed against the cold, and she called out, "Text me when you're home, Dad. Don't take the hill." She waved. My daughter stood in her own doorway with cake in her hand and waved at me like her hands were clean. I want to stop you right here for a second, friend, because I've thought about this part more than any other. Put yourself in that truck. You've got the number on your phone and you've got the person who did it standing in a lit doorway waving. Tell me down in the comments right now, would you have turned around and gone back up that walk and said it out loud in front of everybody? Type lewd. Or would you have driven away and gone quiet and cold? Type quiet. I want to know. I've never been sure I chose right. Curtis didn't take me to a police station. He didn't take me to Breeze. He drove me to the credit union where he works, up on Central Entrance, and led us into a dark building on a Sunday night, and our boots on that lobby floor were the loudest thing in the world. He shut his office door. He sat down across from me and he said, "Ray." He'd called me Ray exactly twice in 18 years. It was always Pop. "Everything I'm about to put in front of you has been verified 3 separate ways. I'm not bringing you a suspicion. I'm bringing you a file." I said, "How long have you known?" 5 months. 5 months. I let that sit in the room, and I didn't come up out of that chair the way you might expect, because I looked at that man's face and I could see plain as day that those 5 months had cost him more sleep than they'd cost me. "Why'd you sit on it?" He folded his hands. "Because if I'd come to you with half of it, she'd have burned the other half in a weekend, and you'd have looked at me and seen a bitter ex-husband with an axe to grind. And because Bree had to get there on her own, I wasn't going to be the man who handed my daughter her mother's crimes in a folder." Then he opened it. He started with the invoices. North Shore Companion Care, LLC. 14 months of billing against Petey's Trust for in-home respite hours, companion care, transportation, community integration support. Every invoice between $3,000 and $4,800, never one over 5. "Look at the ceiling on these," Curtis said. "Your trust document requires co-trustee review and documentation for any single disbursement over $5,000. Every one of these sits underneath it. That's not sloppiness, Ray. That's a woman reading her own paperwork and building underneath the line. 61 invoices. For care that was never delivered by a company that never had an employee, billed to a boy she was already taking for donuts on Fridays and putting on Facebook. Then the house. She'd used the durable power of attorney I signed with a cast on my arm and opened a home equity line of credit against Gladstone Street. $90,000 drawn. The house Maureen picked in 1979 because of the light on the water. I'd been sleeping in a house I was 3 payments from losing and didn't know it. Then the mail. She'd switched every statement to paperless and routed the notifications to an email address I'd never seen, and she'd opened a post office box on central entrance for anything that still came on paper. I'd been flying blind for over a year, friend, and the person who painted over the windshield was the one taking my grandson to the barber. There's more, Curtis said. He slid a single sheet across the desk, and I knew from his face that this was the one that would do the real damage. Petey has an ABLE account. It's a little savings account a disabled person can have without losing their benefits. His paychecks from Super One went into it. 200 and change every couple weeks. For 2 years. He knew the balance to the dollar. He'd tell you the balance if you gave him 30 seconds of eye contact. $2,437, and he was saving it for one specific thing, which was 2 seats behind the dugout at Target Field and a hotel with a pool for him and me in August. Empty. She'd taken it in one transaction on a Tuesday. 1,100 of it went to a nail salon, a Kohl's, and a payment on a pontoon. I put both my hands flat on that desk and I looked at them for a while. Locksmith's hands. 38 years of making sure the wrong people couldn't get in. There's one more, Curtis said. It was a page from the folder I'd signed at my kitchen table, and buried in the middle of that stack was an amendment. I never read that removed Curtis and Bree as successor trustee and standby guardian, and put Dana alone in both chairs. My own hand, my own pen. I erased my granddaughter myself and thanked the woman who handed me the paper. And then Curtis said, Ray, there's one more thing, and it's the reason I couldn't wait any longer. For 7 months, Dana had been telling a story. To her cousins, to my neighbor Gil across the street, to the women at the church she doesn't attend, to the front desk at Dr. Adeyemi's office. Little worried remarks, always kind, always concerned. Dad's slipping. He left the truck running in the driveway again. He's not managing Petey the way he thinks he is. I've had to step in way more than anybody knows. She had a consultation on the books with an attorney in Superior about a guardianship petition, and she'd scheduled me a capacity evaluation for the following month, and hadn't told me what it was. She'd told me it was a follow-up for my wrist. Do you understand what that is, friend? If she got a judge to declare me incapacitated, she becomes my guardian. Every dollar she took becomes a court-approved trustee decision. And she gets Petey. Not just my money, my boy. Signed over, sealed, and legal. And I'd have been sitting in a chair somewhere being told what a good daughter I had. She wasn't robbing me. She was building a room around me, one worried phone call at a time. My phone buzzed on that desk. Bree. Curtis put it on speaker. Her voice was flat and careful, the voice of a woman holding herself together with both hands. She said everybody was fine, the party was winding down, Mom was cleaning up. Then she went quiet for a second. Grandpa. Petey just gave Mom the last piece of his cake. He told her she's his best friend. Nobody said anything for a while. The 3 of us just let that sentence stand there in that dark office. I thought about what it cost my granddaughter to stand in that kitchen and hear it. Bree defended her mother her whole life to her father, to me, to her own doubts at 2 in the morning. And her mother had used a broken boy's love as the curtain to work behind. Then Curtis said, quiet, almost like he was asking himself, what do you want to do, Pop? Here's what I've learned about being 77 with $9,000 and the truth sitting on your chest. You get 2 roads. You can be the fire. You can call her that minute and say every true and terrible thing that's been climbing your throat all night, and it will feel magnificent for about 90 seconds. Or you can be the cold thing, the quiet thing, the thing that actually gets your boy his August. I thought about a code on a door. I thought about a room Petey has never seen. I said, I want every exit shut before she knows anybody's looking. Not for me. He comes first. My feelings can get in line. Curtis nodded once. He already had the plan. I'll be honest with you, friend, the man my father raised couldn't have done it. He'd have gone back up that walk in Hermantown and put his fist through a storm door. But I've learned what Maureen always knew. Fire feels good, and it doesn't heat a single room. Monday morning at 8:40, I was in the office of an elder law attorney named Ruth Ann Sandvik on Superior Street. Curtis had called ahead Sunday night. She went through that file the way a surgeon goes through a body, methodical, unhurried, seeing exactly what had to come out. By 11 o'clock, the durable power of attorney was revoked, filed, and effective. By noon, she'd filed an emergency petition to remove Dana as co-trustee and freeze the trust account. By 2, the HELOC lender had a formal notice of fiduciary abuse on their desk and a hold on the line of credit. My daughter lost every key she had before she finished her lunch break at the dental office. She had no idea. By Thursday, Curtis's file was in the hands of a sergeant in the St. Louis County Financial Crimes Unit named Owen Marchetti. Marchetti told him he'd never had a private citizen hand him a case he didn't have to rebuild from scratch first. And that whole week, Dana came by. She brought groceries. She took Petey for donuts on Friday. She stood in my kitchen and reorganized my pill minder and asked me how my back was holding up after the birthday. Better, I said. Just tired. You've got to slow down, Dad. I worry about you constantly. I looked at my daughter across the kitchen where I taught her to crack an egg. I thought about $2,437. I thought about a boy counting down to Friday. I picked up my coffee and I said, "You know what, honey? I think from here on out, I'm going to start reading every single thing that comes into this house." She smiled. She said that was a good idea. Now, I promised to tell you this true, and that means telling you the part about my own child that I'd rather skip. I don't believe Dana woke up one morning a thief. I think it started with a number on a screen and a story she told herself. I think she looked at $412,000 sitting in an account for a boy who will never buy a house or take a vacation, and she decided it was going to rot there or get eaten by a group home someday, and that she was the one doing the work, the one showing up, the one who'd earned a say. I think every invoice had a justification attached, and every justification made the next one a little easier to write. That's the part that scares me worse than if she'd been a monster. She reasoned her way there one comfortable step at a time. Most people who do this aren't cackling in the dark, friend. They've just talked themselves into believing they're owed. 3 weeks later I called her. "Honey, my back's finally right. Come Sunday. We're doing Petey's birthday over at my house, a do-over, the way it should have gone. Bring that cake he liked." She showed up at 5 with the sheet cake and a bottle of wine. Bree came, Curtis came, and Dana raised an eyebrow at that and let it go, because it was for Petey. The table was set nice. Petey wore the shirt with the walleye on it. And Dana was everything she has always been, in a room warm, capable, refilling glasses before anybody asked, telling a story about her boss that made even Bree laugh in spite of what she was carrying. Then, partway through, somebody knocked. I got up. I walked across my own floor, past 38 years of my own work on my own doors, and I opened it. 2 investigators and a deputy, calm, paperwork in hand. I'd spoken with them Thursday. They knew exactly where they were and exactly who they'd come for. Behind me, my daughter stopped talking mid-sentence. I stepped aside, and I watched her face the moment it landed. And I'll tell you what wasn't on it first, friend. It wasn't shame. Her eyes went fast to me, to Curtis, to the back door, hunting an exit that wasn't there anymore. Every one of them had been shut for 3 weeks. And Petey stood up. He didn't understand. He is never going to understand. He saw people at the door and he did what he always does, which is include them. He said, "We're having cake. Do you want cake?" And then he went over and he hugged his Aunt Dana, hard, the way he hugs, with his whole chest, and he said into her shoulder, "Are you coming back for the cake?" And then he turned to the deputy and said, proudly, the way you'd introduce a celebrity, "That's my Aunt Dana. She takes me for donuts on Fridays." Let that sit a minute. Because, in that one moment, my grandson's brain injury did the cruelest and the kindest thing I have ever watched. It kept her. He will never comprehend what she did. He will never once look at her and understand. Her name is going to stay clean and warm in that boy's mind for the rest of his life. And she will never have to earn that. And she can never, ever lose it. Bree stood up. She'd been writing something for 2 weeks and cutting it down, and when the moment came, she found it was shorter than she thought. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. "He's going to ask me about you every Friday, Mom, for years. And I'm going to have to decide what to tell him every single time." She took a breath. "You get to stay his favorite person. That's the one thing you keep out of this. And you didn't earn 1 minute of it." They walked my daughter out my front door, and Petey went to the window with his plate still in his hand, and he waved at the car all the way down Gladstone Street and hollered, "Bye, Aunt Dana. See you Friday." She pleaded guilty. The file was too clean to fight. Financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, theft by swindle, and a felony for the false business filings on top of it. 58 months. Restitution was ordered at $301,400. Now here's the honest part, because people always ask and nobody ever answers it. I've gotten back about 86,000 of it, a seized account, and the sale of a pontoon. The rest comes at $250 a month, which means the math finishes somewhere around the year 21-26. I have made my peace with that. Or I'm making it. Some days that's the most a man can do. The HELOC got unwound. Ruth Ann Sandvik found paths through the trust code I didn't know existed, and Petey's care is protected not the way I drew it up, but protected. And that Able account was made whole inside of a week. Curtis and Bree did it quietly and told me not to make a thing out of it, so I won't, except right here. We went to Target Field in August. 2 seats behind the dugout, hotel with a pool. Petey got a foul ball in the 4th inning off the bat of a man whose name he now says every single day. Here's what 14 months taught me, friend, and I'd hand it across the table to you if I could. Danger doesn't come to your door looking like danger. It comes carrying a casserole. It comes offering to take the heaviest thing you own off your back on the exact day you can't lift it 1 more inch. And the mistake I made, the mistake most of us make, is believing exhaustion is a good enough excuse to stop reading. It isn't. It never was. So before you close this and go on with your evening, do these 5 things. Set up your own online access to every account with your own email and your own password on a device nobody else touches, not because you don't trust them, but because trust and verification were never enemies. If there's a trust involved, get a copy of the actual document and read what the disbursement rules say, because that's the line the careful ones build underneath. Name 2 people, not 1, on anything that matters. A second signature is the cheapest insurance on earth. Never sign anything the same day it's put in front of you. A good person will wait a day, and a bad one will tell you why you can't. And put your medical and guardianship wishes in writing with your doctor's office directly, so nobody can walk in and narrate you to your own physician. And I'll say this for the folks who think this is an old person's problem. It isn't. Bad family doesn't wait until you turn 70. It waits until you're tired. Here's the question I want you to sit with tonight. If the person taking everything from the one you love most wasn't a stranger, wasn't a scammer on the phone, but was your own child, would you have the nerve to go quiet and cold instead of loud? I still don't know that I had it. I just know Petey needed me to find it. Now tell me in the comments, because I read every one of these. Type a 1 if you think I did right going quiet and legal instead of saying it at that table. Type a 2 if you'd have wanted me to look my daughter in the eye and say every word out loud. Type a 3 if you honestly have no idea what you'd have done, because that's the most honest answer there is, and it's the one I respect most. And tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. I love seeing how far these stories travel in the dark. There's a second half to this. I haven't told you what happened when Bree had to decide whether to visit her mother, and the phone call I got from that facility 8 months later that I did not see coming. That one's next, and it's the harder one. If this moved you, subscribe and hit that like button so it finds the person who needs it tonight. I'll see you on the next one, friend. Thank you, truly. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences, fully rewritten and reimagined to create original content. Any resemblance to actual people or events is coincidental.